بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد خير الأولين وآخرين وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما. اللهم زدنا ولا تنقصنا وأكرمنا ولا تهنا وأعطنا ولا تحرمنا وآثرنا ولا تؤثر علينا وارض عنا وأرضنا يا رب العالمين. ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Inshallah, hopefully that's better. Okay. Alhamdulillah, it's once again an honor to be here at the Yasin Foundation. This particular talk is entitled Reality Distortion, Understanding the Tools of the Dajjal. Now, of course, the fundamental reason for this talk has its own genesis, but originally it was planned for next month, but in light of recent events, we felt that it was important to bring it forward, especially when we consider the fact that many people, many Muslims, have been publicly taking on, we call it the mainstream media, with respect to the misinformation and disinformation, or rather just simply plain lies with respect to what is happening in Gaza and with the Palestinians in general. Alhamdulillah, for the most part, we could say that those who we have seen stand their ground have done so bravely and effectively. A great many Muslims have been there in the public doing this. But I also felt that Muslims need to exercise some caution here, because I believe there's a tendency to think that everything that we hear and see coming from what we call the legacy media or the mainstream media is not worthy of some type of suspicion. It's as if Muslims, we only think that the news is untrue or false when Muslims are being demonized, or perhaps other people that we have some familiarity with are being demonized. And myself personally, I used to feel that same way about black people, especially during the 1990s. I felt that if you looked at much of what was on the television and in the news in terms of the reporting, that it seemed to have been a conscious and deliberate campaign to demonize black life and black experience. That one would think that every single black person was a gang member, that every single black neighborhood was unsafe, that every single black person was a poor person who was living in a type of hellish experience. And a similar thing was being done to the Hispanics, or we call the Latin Americans, or whatever term they prefer, and so being demonized as just a bunch of drug dealers, who are coming across, drug smugglers coming across the border into the United States, to hurt Americans or to sell their drugs and go back and do the things that they do back home. But it actually would really open my own eyes, And the reason I'm telling you this is because I think it's important for us to be honest at times about the possibility or our being prone to brainwashing, right? That all of us can be brainwashed. I am basically acknowledging that I have been brainwashed before, right? And I think that most people on the planet today are brainwashed when it comes to certain types of topics. So, and what really opened my eyes, I would say, to be totally honest, right, was the presidency of Donald Trump, right, and that Donald Trump took on the media, that he popularized the term fake news, right, and I think most people themselves didn't really understand the value of what Donald Trump was doing at the time. That we just saw Donald Trump as being just a very mean-spirited person, is an uncouth individual who's unfit to be president. Look how mean he is to the media. They're just trying to do their jobs and trying to hold him accountable. That was against the narrative. But it turns out that most, if not all, of the things that he challenged them on actually turned out to be false and actual fake news, at least for those who have been able to overcome what we call Trump derangement syndrome, right? So if you can overlook his character flaws and then think about who he himself fundamentally was fighting against, you'll see that they are those people who are actually more dangerous than even him or he ever could be, to be totally honest. So alhamdulillah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, at least up to this point, he's given us these opportunities to continue to preach and state our narrative. I mean, now of course, another thing I would say that contributed to these type of opportunities was the very fact that Elon Musk, that he bought Twitter, and he now calls it X, and it had been revealed that when it was under different management, it was dominated by the globalist powers, and in particular those who were biased in the direction of the Democrat Party, right? And so when documents were revealed exposing what we call the Twitter files, which showed that the FBI actually had been colluding with Twitter and paying them, right, to censor certain material, that Elon himself, he actually did the world a favor, right? And of course, he himself is an enemy because of that, of those same people who I would say are trying to ultimately enslave humanity. They're trying to enslave humanity, but we can also say that they're trying to reduce our population. Now, this particular talk today, of course, is going to challenge you to reconsider, I guess you would say, if you do have this type of opposition to what particularly we call conspiracy theories. Because the truth is that when we consider the past few years that we've just gone through, with COVID in particular, that most, if not all, of what were called conspiracy theories have become conspiracy fact, right? So, and I would say that in one of the actual ways that they are able to control us is making us see a person who actually delves into conspiracies as quacks and wackos, right? Oh, here we go, another conspiracy theory. Oh, you must be one of those QAnon people, right? So I don't want to be identified or labeled a conspiracy theorist, therefore I'm not going to entertain even the possibility that maybe my own government is out to harm me, right? So that itself is extremely important thing here, So there's a hadith of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. This is in the Sahih of Imam Muslim, at least this particular version of the hadith, where he says, إِذَا تَشَهَّدَ أَحَدُكُمْ فَلْيَسْتَعِذْ بِاللَّهِ مِنْ أَرْبَعٍ. When one of you recites the tashahhud, at-tahiyyatu lillah, and during your prayer, then you should seek refuge from four things. مِنْ عَذَابِ جَهَنَّمْ, from the punishment of hell. وَمِنْ عَذَابِ الْقَبْرِ, from the torment of the grave. وَمِنْ فِتْنَةِ الْمَحْيَا وَالْمَمَاتِ, and the trials of life and death. وَمِن شَرِّ فِتْنَةِ الْمَسِيحِ الدَّجَّالِ, and the evil of the fitna of the impostor Christ or the Antichrist. So the Prophet ﷺ actually is telling us to take refuge against the fitna of the Masih ad-Dajjal during our prayers. And how many times do we pray every single day? Right? As if the Prophet ﷺ wants us to constantly have the Masih ad-Dajjal on our minds, right? That he would recommend that during your prayers, during tashahhud, which happens twice, right? During your salah, that he wants you to take refuge from al-Masih ad-Dajjal, from fitnati Masih ad-Dajjal. Imran ibn Hussein, the Sahabi radiallahu anhu, he said, سمعت رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم يقول ما بين خلق آدم وقيام الساعة أكبر من أمر الدجال. There's nothing greater happening between the creation of Adam and the onset of the hour than the matter of the false Messiah. So, anyone on this earth, anything that ever happened, not World War III, not World War II, not any war, right, is worse and more concerning than the Masih ad-Dajjal. Why? Because the Masih ad-Dajjal is concerned with your iman. He doesn't, of course, he'll settle for taking your life if it can show to others that this is the consequence of those who actually rebel and resist. But he's more concerned with your soul. He wants you to be damned. As Masih ad-Dajjal is a servant, a minion of Satan. As we know, he is a human being. But when he rises, he will be supported by a system which will accommodate his attempts to convince us that he is God, or he is a messenger of God, and also for us to worship him and serve him. That fundamentally is what he will try to do. Now, another reason I wanted to speak about this in the context of what's happening in Gaza and Palestine is that we all know that the Israeli-Palestinian situation, right, is a powder keg. To talk about it can be a powder keg. To take a particular position for or against one particular side can be a powder keg. And throughout my life, I've seen multiple conflagrations, right, where, of course, Israel will decide to go in and they'll kill a certain hundreds of thousands of people in Gaza or in Palestine. And then all of a sudden, someone's able to step in and to kick the powder and stop the fire. The fire is burning, is on its way to the actual keg itself, and something and puts his foot in and stops it. But something feels different this time. Something feels different this time in that you have the Western public awakening to a realization. Well, multiple realizations, to be totally frank. The one important realization is that things are not as black and white as they originally thought they were. Or perhaps they are, but in the opposite direction. Because the black and white to it is that if you take something from someone, you steal something from someone, if you kill someone, then justice is to give it back or to pay restitution for lives lost, right? Regardless of who you are as an individual, so it's really black and white in that sense, right? The Palestinians were pushed off their land, their homes were demolished or just taken from them, taken over. Many people were killed, displaced. Okay, how do you solve the problem? Give it back. Let them go back to their homes. Give them back their land, right? Pay restitution. But of course, because of this particular world and its new policies and its new attitude and its new norms has made that a very complicated process. Has made it a very complicated process when we look at what we call international law and things like that, human rights, which it seems it didn't apply when this incident happened. I told a story a few weeks ago about when I was in high school and my class visited the United Nations building, and we were on a tour, and this woman, she took us to one particular office of the UN, and this particular office was dedicated to helping countries retrieve their countries when they're stolen from them. And I thought this was really brilliant. I was like, well, this is really amazing. You actually have an office at the UN dedicated to this, right? When some people invade other people's countries, that you go in and you take them back. So I'm young, high schooler. I ask her, I say, what about Palestine? And so she herself, and I'm quite sure she probably was prepped for this, because on the wall there's a map of the world. So she turned my attention to the map. And she says, well, if you notice, there is no country on this map called Palestine. Problem solved. Done deal. So in other words, I knew very early that there was never any plan to return what was taken away. And so what's really interesting in politics as well is that all of us know who are old enough that in American politics, the two major parties, the Democrat and the Republican Party, are, this is a bipartisan issue when it comes to support for Israel. Except that on the Democrat side, there's a very small sort of faction of politicians who have recently entered into the fray, who actually voted against support for Israel in terms of this new funding that they're planning to give to them. But there's almost a unanimous agreement that, okay, we're going to give funding to Israel with respect to what's happening in Gaza in light of what happened. But when we look at the American public, the thing that's interesting is that half of the Democrats are pro-Palestinians. I'm talking about the American public. Half of those who identify as Democrats are pro-Palestinian. On the Republican side, while we may not find people who actually will come out and say, I'm pro-Palestinian, their attitudes are such that one would think that they are pro-Palestinian in that they just don't want to be involved in other people's business. Because the new Republican base are a bunch of pro-Trumpers, and Trump is always saying, America first. That's what matters. So they said, no, we don't need to be in Ukraine. We don't need to be in Ukraine. Ukraine is not the 51st state of America. We don't need to be in Israel either. Israel is not the 51st state of America. We're tired of you taking our tax money and spending it on other people and leaving us without any help, especially in light of a crumbling economy, crumbling infrastructure. Gas prices are high, food prices are going up. People find it almost impossible to afford buying a new home, et cetera, et cetera. They say, well, how is it you can take my money and send it over there? Maui is part of Hawaii, and that's one of the states of America. Why didn't you rebuild those homes after they were burned down? Why do you send those people only $700 checks, right? But you're going to send how many billion to Ukraine? How many billion are you going to send to Israel? So this is the fundamental, the attitude on the right. And I'm talking about the base. I'm not talking about the politicians. I'm talking about the base. So in other words, the politicians are not serving the American people. And more people have been awakened to this realization that this is the case, that they work for the bankers. They work for the billionaires. They don't work for the majority of the people, right? So more people, so it's different in that sense. And it's also different in that this time around, at least for me, and I never noticed this before, there are more and more Jewish people coming out in support of the Palestinians, coming out and saying that, no, Zionism has nothing to do with Judaism, right? They don't represent us. More and more vocal people. So it's different this time around, which led me to think that we need a broader contextualization to these issues, at least from a religious standpoint, because even many of the Orthodox Jews in Israel or Philistine, whatever, if you allow me to say Israel, many of them actually are expecting or believe that perhaps very soon, by the end of this year, if certain things occur, they're going to be entering into their messianic period. So they believe that their Messiah is about to come very soon. So this, you can find this, look up YouTube videos. You see they're talking about that. There's certain people they're identifying, and they look up the stories about the red heifers, etc. But things are definitely different. So the prophet said that there's nothing greater happening between the creation of Adam and the onset of the hour than the matter of the false Messiah. He also says, سيأتي على الناس سنوات خداعات يصدق فيها الكاذب ويكذب فيها الصادق ويؤتمن فيها الخائن ويخون فيها الأمين ويتكلم فيها الرويبضة قيل يا رسول الله ما الرويبضة. He said there shall come or will come upon the people sanawat khada'at, years of deception or deceptive years where there's going to be great deception happening. يصدق فيها الكاذب, those who lie will be deemed to be honest. ويكذب فيها الصادق, those who are honest will deem to be liars. ويؤتمن فيها خائن, the treacherous, the untrustworthy, they will be trusted. They will be given trust. ويخون فيها الأمين, and the trustworthy will be labeled as traitors. ويتكلم فيها الرويبضة, and the Ruwaybida, they will speak during this time. And then the Sahaba asked the Messenger alayhi salatu wasalam, what are the Ruwaybida? And in one narration he says, الرجل تافه يتكلم في أمر العامة, the insignificant man or insignificant men who will speak about the affairs of the public. Another version of the hadith calls them al-fawasiq, the little scoundrels who will speak about the affairs of the public, or man la yu'ba'u bihi, those who are not paid any attention to, will speak about the affair of the public. Personally, I believe this applies to a number of different types of people who are popular today or we identify today. First and foremost, I would say it refers to the media. The individuals who are placed in front of a TV camera and they're being asked to do what? Read the script. That's it. Read the script. Right? So if you're just reading someone else's script, you're insignificant. You're an insignificant person. You're a little scoundrel, right? So so you've been told to do that. Same thing with Hollywood actors. What do they do for their living? They read someone's script, right? They give to promote a narrative, promote some type of idea, right? But this also would include, I would say, online influencers. Not all of them, but a lot of them, right? Who, in order to save their pages, what do? They comply, right? YouTube says, hey, you can't say that here. If you keep saying that, we're going to close down your page. Or it can be other places as well. YouTube, it can be any of the other popular places where kids or adults they go to. But here the Prophet ﷺ said during this time of these deceptive years, that you're going to have the Ruwaybidah speaking. And then we add on top of this things like artificial intelligence, deep fake, where now, they can get just a little snippet of your voice. They can reproduce an audio with, so-and-so said this, Suja, Muhammad, Ahmed, Fatima, she said this, and we say, it does sound like Fatima, doesn't it? Right. And then they throw in the video, right? Quantum computing, all these new things, right? Which they're really changing the game for everyone. Yeah. What is real and what's not at that point? We already know that the first casualty of war is the truth. We already know that. And the Prophet ﷺ even said, "Al-harbu khida," that war is deception. And so we have to be very deliberate during warfare, that we automatically just accept whatever claims are being made by our side against the other. And of course, we're going to challenge their claims because we don't believe them to begin with. So what they tell us, how many babies had their heads chopped off? Yeah, 40 babies had their heads chopped off by Hamas, and turns out, big lie. But it didn't really matter because it spread. That was all that matters. Like, enough people heard it to believe that these crazy, evil Muslims, they did this to the little babies. Why did they do it? Because they hate the Jews, or because their religion demands it of them to do so. Right? Turns out to be a lie. There's still people debating about the hospital. Right? Was it bombed? And if it was bombed, who bombed it? Right? So you're in the fog of war. What's real, what's not real? Right? When they show you a video of something happening, was it recent or was it from the past? Or was it computer generated? Right? So we have these additional challenges right now. And our deen, our ulama have highlighted for us, and this is really, I won't say is something we can attribute to Islam itself, because this is universal. The tools or the ways to know that something's real. Right? So we learn that fundamentally the first way you know something's real is through the five senses. Right? You smell it, you touch it, you taste it, right, etc. We know the five senses. We hear it, right? And so we would assume that if we hear something, we see something, it has to be real. I saw a video, it has to be real. Yeah. But it was a video, and we have to consider the possibility that the video itself may have been generated utilizing some special technology, right? Now, this is not like the Gulf War or when they decided to go into Afghanistan to try to get Osama bin Laden, and they gave us that really poor quality video claiming that this is a video proving that Osama bin Laden, he actually admitted doing 9/11. But people can say, well, it's really grainy, you can hardly hear it. Now they got a lot of better, the equipment is much better now, right? So of course the five senses, so we know things through those things, but in other words, it means that if we know that there's a possibility that these things could have been generated by technology, then we have to actually contact people who are actually on the ground. Because that at least we're going to get the information from firsthand, right? People who are credible, people who are trustworthy, who actually are part of the experience, people who actually encountered or survived the experience. What do they say, right? Aql, reason, logic is another source of ilm, of knowledge, right? Source of true knowledge. Right, certain things just don't make sense, right? So we have to use aql And then thirdly, reliable reports. Reliable reports. In other words, when the information is so widespread from first-hand witnesses, first-hand survivors, right, who we give us no reason to believe that they all conspired, right, to concoct this lie, then it has to be real. If you've never been to China before, you know China exists because there are so many people who have claimed to have been there, and those people don't know each other. See, I went to China last year, right? So we have to return to some basic principles of fact-finding. There's a hadith where the Prophet ﷺ said, "Man sami'a bid-dajjali falyan'a anhu." Whoever hears of the Dajjal should keep his distance. فَإِنَّ الرَّجُلَ يَأْتِيهِ يَتْبَعُهُ وَهُوَ يَحْسِبُ أَنَّهُ صَادِقٌ بِمَا يَبْعَثُ بِهِ مِنَ الشُّبُهَاتِ. It's because a person will come to follow him thinking him to be truthful in light of the intelligent tricks he has sent with him. بِمَا يُبْعَثُ بِهِ مِنَ الشُّبُهَاتِ. Now shaitan, of course, he tries to find any particular inroad to the heart, any inroad to the mind, to make us act out, to make us disobey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the human being is both animal and rational. We have passions, and then we have emotions, right? We have passions, we have emotions. Right? So quite often, commercials, restaurants, and someone's trying to sell a car, they appeal to some particular passion that we have, right? Say, hey, watch this, hey, you want this, and they convince us, and we go for it, right? But when it comes to the passions, most of the time, most people know that, I know I shouldn't be doing this. I know I shouldn't drink the alcohol. I know I shouldn't do the drug. I know I shouldn't watch porn, right? Right? You know that it's wrong. But the shubha, in other words, when the individual is appealing to the mind, is much more subtle. That you may be convinced that this is the right thing to do, or this thing is real and this thing is true, because you have not asked the right questions. So the fundamental primary tool of the Dajjal is to utilize things that distort reality for the human being. Now, of course, if you are a hyper-emotive individual, that you're easily wound up, you have problems with anger, and you are insecure, I guess you would say, they can easily manipulate you. Because they'll say, hey, think about this in terms of elections. They'll say, hey, well, you can't vote for that person. Why not? Because he doesn't like black people. Now, of course, if I'm an individual, I really put a lot of stock into people liking me, I'm saying, no, I'm not going to vote for that person. Why would I vote for somebody who doesn't like me? Why would I do that? He doesn't like Muslims. You can't vote for them. You ever heard what he said about Muslims? He said, well, no, I can't possibly vote for somebody who says something negative about Islam. And on one level, you can kind of understand it. You say, well, yeah, it's pride. I'm a Muslim, and why would I support somebody who doesn't like me, something about me, right? True. But we forget, the guy's not Muslim. The guy, may not be black, but it's like, but realistically, what matters in the end, and I always say this, is that, and particularly when it comes to politics, is that what matters more than anything is that when I sit down with this individual who's trying to convince me to vote for him, I want to know, is this individual open to negotiation? Will this individual actually give me what I want? I have interests. I'm going to say, hey, these are my interests. These are my community interests. We want this, that, and that. What are you going to do about it? If they follow through and they conform to me, I feel, hey, well, who cares how he feels about me at that point? Because I'm able to secure the rights of my community and protect my community. That's between him and Allah. What he feels about me, if he looks down upon me, that's his problem. That's her problem. Right? But again, That's one way that you're manipulated, through your emotions. Through fear, there's another way. And like what's happening with the Israeli community right now, is that fear, they're reacting on the basis of fear. Same thing happened in 9/11. Fear. And what does it do? Fear, and they step in and say, listen, we will protect you. We will avenge you. But the only way we can do so is to take away this right, that right, that right, and that right. There's this new thing called COVID. And hey, we're going to protect you. We created it. It got out, right? But we're going to protect you. So make sure you do this, that, and that, and that, and that. And we don't question it. Why? Because we're afraid. We're afraid. We're not understanding that there's some other objective that many people, again, at the top, have. And they've done that to us too many times up at this point. I wanted to read a few quotes from Malcolm X, rahmatullahi alayhi, and they pertain to both the media and to politics in general in America. And I'm not, reading these simply to say, okay, well, there's a problem, with the left of America. There's a problem with both the right and left in America. But Malcolm has some specific, very special comments about the left. But this first quote, he says, the media is the most powerful entity on earth. They have the power to make the innocent guilty and to make the guilty innocent. And that's power, because they control the minds of the masses. I mean, think about the way things were prior to television or even radio. I mean, there was a big scam that happened in the early 20th century. One guy broadcast what he called an alien invasion. And there are a lot of Americans that actually believed that we were being invaded by aliens. It was on the radio. This is radio. They did this experiment. But then you have television, you have cable TV, and then you add on top of that the news. Who controls the news? Do we have investigative reporting anymore, or just simply parrots of the talking points of the people at the top? So that was the first quote. Second quote, it said, if you're not careful, the newspapers will have you hating the people who are being oppressed and loving the people who are doing the oppressing. And of course, that's exactly what we see what's happening today, right? That he was definitely before his time. Imagine if Malcolm was still alive today. I think the Muslims would have been a lot further along. But unfortunately, we didn't have that blessing. That he was able to see some things that so many people could not see. He could see the danger. He could see the manipulation that's coming from the media. The third quote, he says, the white liberal differs from the white conservative only in one way. The liberal is more deceitful than the conservative. The liberal is more hypocritical than the conservative. Both want power, but the white liberal is the one who has perfected the art of posing as the Negro's friend and benefactor. So we can substitute Negro with Muslim there as well. Then he goes on and says, and by winning the friendship, allegiance, and support of the Negro, Muslim, the white liberal is able to use the Negro, Muslim, as a pawn or tool in this political football game that is constantly raging between the white liberals and white conservatives. Now, of course, the language is a bit racialized, but race itself is an inseparable part of America's history. America, when it was founded with a condition, or one of the conditions, to become a citizen. And this was after the first Naturalization Act had passed under President George Washington. that one of the most important conditions was to be a white man, free white man. So now, of course, today we say, well, this is problematic. How are you going to establish a country based upon race? And I would say, to be fair to the Americans, well, they couldn't base it upon Christianity, right? They just finished waging the war between the Protestant and the Catholic Church, which lasted for more than a century. And they decided, we need a new type of country, right? We're not going to base citizenship on religion, we're going to base it on race. And of course, you have to be a landowner on top of that. So everyone couldn't vote. Not every single American could. Being a white person wasn't sufficient, but it was a condition, right, in America at the time. Now, the reason why this is important, it goes back to what I mentioned before about Elon Musk, which is that it was the white liberal, or in this case, the Democrats, right, who were themselves working with the federal government to censor the voices of doctors, scientists, and others who are challenging the narrative with respect to COVID. And they also censored the New York Post story about Hunter Biden as well, right? And then we had multiple members of the intelligence community come out and claim that, oh, this is all Russian information. They all supported that as well. And then, of course, after he takes over, Elon takes over Twitter, he exposes more information about these things, what was happening on the back end. So these, again, are tools or ways that they go about manipulating the public. Actually, I have one more quote from him. So he says, or he said, the white person that you see calling himself liberal is the most dangerous thing in the entire Western Hemisphere. This is Malcolm X, what he said. Now, him saying that is not saying, you should support the right, but he's just basically making the point that these people are like the Harlem Globetrotters of manipulation, the Harlem Globetrotters of misinformation, etc. And you be very careful, and I don't believe anything has changed since Malcolm said this, right? Another important thing I think that we need to look into is a CIA operation. It was called Operation Mockingbird. Now, Operation Mockingbird, if you go to the Wikipedia page of Operation Mockingbird, you'll find out that Wikipedia is biased as well, is also controlled. Right? It'll say, it's an alleged sort of plot or plan by the CIA, right? And then what was their plan? Their plan, it said it started during the Cold War era between the Soviet Union and the United States. And the CIA developed this plan that they wanted to infiltrate the educational centers and especially the media, to put people in there or get the reporters to parrot certain talking points in order to manipulate the American public to believe whatever they wanted to believe, right? So you can look it up and find it. But the thing that's interesting about the Wikipedia page is this. Wikipedia is supposed to be open source, and so people are supposed to be able to come to the page and change it when you find new information and evidence. But that particular page, you can't change it. It has a lock on it. You can't go in and change any information because it's deferential towards the CIA, right? And so the reason I even mentioned this is that I'm convinced that their operation was successful and that pretty much everyone in what we call the legacy media, right, either is knowingly or unknowingly following the direction of the federal intelligence forces and feeding us information, telling us what they want. Now, but who do they truly serve? As I mentioned before, my opinion and what I observe, they serve the bankers. They serve the bankers. Let me show you how this works. And inshallah, next month we're going to be talking about issues of gender and how that's connected to this as well. But we see in Africa, sub-Saharan Africa, we see a lot of rebellion happening right now. These former colonial governments are now saying, listen, no, we do not want to be under the thumb and the foot of the West anymore, Western Europe and America. No, no more of it. And they've embraced Russia and China. They said, we get a better deal with Russia and China. And the West is trying to impose upon African countries gender ideology. They're trying to compel them to accept and normalize homosexual relationships, homosexual marriage, transgenderism, etc. Well, they push back, say, no, that is not part of our culture. This is from your culture. This is not part of our culture. For some reason, the IMF, International Monetary Fund, World Bank, they step in and say, you know what? You African countries, we're going to sanction you. We're not going to give you the financial support we were giving to you before. Why would they want to impose gender ideology upon African countries, these poor countries, right? Why would they want to do that? I mean, these are banks. And this is really what gets down to the crux of the issue, which is that if you actually look closely at organizations like the World Economic Forum, the Council on Foreign Relations, the UN, you'll find many, many people, and also written on their vision statements, that many people there who believe that we have too many people on the planet. They believe that humanity is a threat for the planet Earth itself, that's been here for, that we're supposedly a threat. And they believe it's important to reduce the human population to a certain number. The founder of CNN, he's been on record admitting this as well. Yeah, we have too many people, we need to do something about it. Bill Gates, we've seen videos from Bill Gates talk about how controlling the population or reducing the population can be done utilizing multiple methods, including vaccines, he said. So again, this is all conspiracy fact. This is not conspiracy theory, right? You can look it up, you can find this information, at least right now you still can. We don't know when they're going to block the information from us, right? But Operation Mockingbird is just one of many other examples where we're talking about where these individuals, they have their own plan. And part of it is killing a lot of people. They want a lot of people, they don't want as many people on the planet. They want to control the population, reduce freedom in societies. And again, you can read a book written by the founder of the World Economic Forum. His name is Klaus Schwab. And he has a book which came out in 2020 in the midst of the COVID crisis, where it's called COVID-19, The Great Reset. And in that book, one of the things he says right in the very beginning, he said, people are wondering when we're going to go back to normal. And he says, we are never going back to normal. That's the first thing he says, right at the very beginning. It's not going to happen. There's no going back to the old ways of things. This is the new normal, right? But he also mentions that during this, in this future world that they envision, government power has to be expanded, and freedom, the freedom of people, has to be reduced. Government power has to be expanded, people's freedom has to be reduced. So there's a lot I could say. I'm not going to say now, but fundamentally, this idea about the green revolution, I'm not saying that fossil fuels is not a problem, right? I'm not saying that the temperature of the earth hasn't, increased a little bit, right, over the past century, right? But there has not been any clear evidence or argument made proving that the reason for the increase in temperature is directly related to fossil fuels and carbon emissions. Human beings, we breathe out carbon. So carbon is being demonized, right? Human beings breathe out carbon dioxide as if to say that, well, you're a danger, right? You've seen efforts in Europe of them attempting to force farmers to stop utilizing certain types of chemicals which they claim they lead to, they destroy the environment, and that they cause an increase in the global warming. Now again, that itself is its own debate. But the fundamental point I want to make here is that you can believe that global warming is caused by human efforts alone. But at the same time, one has to consider, well, why is it not possible that there are certain things that they are doing to the weather themselves to cause these catastrophic events? Like, for instance, cloud seeding. You know, they can make it rain, you know. They can make it rain, they can make it snow. They have that ability. They've had it for decades. In Vietnam, there was, I think it was called Project Popeye or something like that. You know, in other words, they wanted to prolong the monsoons, and so they seeded the clouds to keep the rain coming in order to demoralize the Viet Cong. So they've been able to do these things for a very long time. You know, so we have these changes in weather events. How do we know that is because of fossil fuels, even though you're not able to draw a straight line between, okay, well, this amount of carbon was emitted and it led to this percentage of increase in the global temperature? You know, there's no barometer that anyone can give you. They're looking at models, right? And there's not a consensus about like a lot of these things that we've been told, right? But at any rate, you know, they scare people once again. Scare tech, hey, you gotta get rid of your gas guzzler. You have to get a green car, you get an electric car. Okay, well, how many people can afford an electric car, first and foremost? And for those who are poorer, who can afford the cheaper electric cars, how long will it drive before you have to stop it to charge again? And what is that going to do? It's going to, again, achieve that goal. Listen, we don't need people moving around that much. We don't need people flying around the earth that much, right? Right, so that, again, these things are stated. They're written in books. That was one book, and then the next year he came out with a book called The Great Narrative, and it was all about how to sell climate change. That's what it was all about. And he has another book called The Fourth Industrial Revolution. And that's what we're going through right now. They say the Fourth Industrial Revolution. They believe in merging man with machine, and again, it may sound crazy, but this is real stuff. I can back it up. But again, I would say this is all part of, I would say, the efforts of the Masih ad-Dajjal. So if we were just focused on something like the COVID lockdowns and mandates, they told us wear a mask. Okay, wear a mask. They told us to stand 6 feet apart. Well, why? Why stand 6 feet apart? Well, if you sneeze, droplets can reach about 30 feet away from you. Why 6 feet? 6 feet, maybe let's stand 30 feet apart. Why 6 feet? Why is it the rest of the world, other than the United States, they were saying 3 feet. We said 6 feet here, right? You know, so okay, you put on your mask before you go into a restaurant, and then when you sit down, you take it off. Okay, well, they were making do all these really silly things. At the end of the day, they tell us, yo, you have to get vaxxed, you have to do your part. But then it comes out that they had never tested it for effectiveness. They had to admit this stuff. It came out later on, we know it didn't work. But they sold it as, okay, hey, well, this is going to save your life. You know, oh, it doesn't save your life. Okay, it'll reduce your symptoms. How do you know that? And they told us that they did long-term expedited studies. I said, well, how can you do a long-term study and a long time hasn't gone by? It doesn't make any sense, right? You know, a few months go by and you tell me, okay, yeah, we expedited the no, it doesn't, I don't know. Doesn't make any sense to me. And we've seen, you know, again, in the past, so many examples of this, WMDs, etc. Inshallah, I'm coming to, inshallah, my conclusion. But when someone controls your food, your water, your shelter, your fuel, your currency, the truth, I mean your news, and your health, they have absolute power and control over you. But that's the situation we find ourselves in. See, food, I mean, who produces your food? Who's buying up all the farmland? What are they trying to do to your food? What are they trying to put in your food? Your water, who controls your water? What are they placing in the water? What type of chemicals are they? What do those chemicals do to your body? It's almost impossible for so many people today to buy shelter. It almost doesn't make sense, right? Even the way we go about purchasing a home. So why does it take me 30 years or 15 years, I mean, to be a homeowner, technically? Is that because, yes, they tell you, you're a homeowner right now, but you just have 30 more years to pay. and it's like, well, didn't people used to build their own homes at one time? Didn't people used to grow their own food at one time? So we put ourselves in a situation where we incur massive amounts of debt. We have long-term debt on homes. We have long-term debts on cars. We have, if we have children who are at college age, we may be, you know, borrowed some money for their education, or, you know, does something similar to that. And then what happens when a crisis happens? Someone steps in and say, hey, if you don't take this shot, you got to go. You can't work here anymore. And you're in a situation where you say, oh my God, my mortgage. Oh my God, my car note. So you're trapped. I mean, a lot of people don't realize that the 9 to 5 is, you know, it hasn't been with the human race for a very long time. This is like early 20th century, 1920s, to be totally honest, when it became widespread, the 9 to 5. Right? But you get the point, I think. So as mentioned, so population reduction, carbon reduction, the expansion of state power, the reduction of freedom, world government, a world with no borders. The Prophet ﷺ said, وَلَا أُحَدِّثُكُمْ حَدِيثًا عَنِ الدَّجَّالِ مَا حَدَّثَ بِهِ نَبِيٌّ قَوْمَهُ. Will I not, or shall I not inform you of something about the Dajjal that no other prophet informed his people about? And he said, إِنَّهُ عَوَرٌ. He's one-eyed. Not a cyclops, but one of his eyes doesn't work properly. وَإِنَّهُ يَجِيءُ وَمَعَهُ بِمِثَالِ الْجَنَّةِ وَالنَّارِ فَالَّتِي يَقُولُ إِنَّهَا الْجَنَّةُ هِيَ النَّارِ. That he will come and he will have something of the like of Jannah, paradise, and hell. And the thing that he says is paradise is actually hell. And then another hadith from Hudayfa ibn Yaman, he says, that Hudayfa said, لَأَنَا مِمَّا مَعَ الدَّجَّالِ أَعْلَمُ مِنْهُ. I am more well informed of what the Dajjal has than he himself is. إن معه نهر من ماء ونهر من نار فالذي ترون أنه نار ماء وأما الذي ترونه أنه ماء نار. It said that he shall have along with him a river of water and a river of fire. And the thing that you see as fire is water, and that which you see as water is fire. فَمَنْ أَدْرَكَ ذَلِكَ مِنْكُمْ فَأَرَادَ الْمَاء فَيَشْرَبْ مِنَ الَّذِي يَرَاهُ أَنَّهُ نَارٌ. And so if any of you happen to come upon that, and he wants water from the Dajjal, then let him drink what he offers, which looks like fire. فَإِنَّهُ سَيَجِدُهُ مَاءً. Because he will find it to be water. So I'll give you water and fire. He goes on and says another hadith, he says, يمر بالخريبة فيقول لها أخرجي كنوزك فتتبعه كنوزها كيعاصيب النحل. That he will pass by demolished buildings and he will say to it, أخرجي كنوزك, bring out your treasures. And then its treasures will follow him like the drones of bees. وَإِنَّ مِن فِتْنَتِهِ أَن يَأْمُرَ السَّمَاءَ أَن تُمْطِرَ فَتُمْطِرَ. And a part of his fitna is that he will order the sky to rain and it will rain. وَيَأْمُرُ الْأَرْضَ أَن تُنْبِتْ فَتُنْبِتْ. And he will order the earth to bring out its vegetation, it will bring out its vegetation. وَإِنَّ مِن فِتْنَتِهِ أَن يَمُرَّ بِالْحَيِّ فَيُكَذِّبُوهُ فَلَا تَبْقَى لَهُ سَائِمَةٌ إِلَّا هَلَكَتْ. And an aspect of his fitna is that he will pass by a neighborhood, and the people in that town, in that neighborhood, they will reject him. They will declare him to be false. And then when he leaves, not a single animal will be left alive as a result of them rejecting him. وَإِنَّ مِن فِتْنَتِهِ أَن يَمُرَّ بِالْحَيِّ فَيُصَدِّقُوهُ فَيَأْمُرُ السَّمَاءَ أَن تُمْطِرَ وَيَأْمُرُ الْأَرْضَ أَن تُنْبِتْ فَتُنْبِتُ حَتَّى تَرُوحَ مَوَاشِيهِمْ مِنْ يَوْمِهِمْ ذَلِكَ أَثْمَنَ مَا كَانَتْ وَأَعْظَمَهُ وَأَمَدَّهُ خَوَاسِرَ وَأَدَرَّهُ ضُرُعًا. He said, and is also a part, an aspect of his fitna, is that he will pass by another town who will believe in him, who will declare him to be truthful. And then he will order the sky to rain, and it will rain. He will order the earth to grow its vegetation, and it will grow. To the extent that all of their animals, all their livestock, on that day will become fatter and bigger and more productive than they have ever been before. So in other words, the water, the fire, your options, they may be, okay, lose my job. Maybe that's the water. He said, you lose your job. You have to do this for me, you're going to be fired. Choose the fire. Choose the job or choose your job. I choose my health. And that's the fire, but it's actually water. You may lose friends. You say, well, if you don't do this, we're not going to be your friends anymore. Okay, well, okay, you're just not my friends anymore. You may be banned from social media. And then again, you say, well, you love social media a lot. It tastes like water, but it's really fire. Hey, it is what it is. Let it happen. I remember in the midst of COVID, I remember the mayor of New York, he comes on television, he's eating some French fries, and he's like, hey, don't you want some of these French fries? You guys come get the shot, get the jab, and you can come and you can go to a restaurant. And I remember listening to this stuff. I said, well, who cares? I eat at home. I don't need to go to a restaurant. You can't go to the movies. So what? I don't need to go to the movies. Right. But a lot of people are like, oh my God, I'm going to go to the movies. I have to go to the movies. I have to get some fries, right, from McDonald's, wherever it may be. And it really meant a lot for those people. Some people are going to call you conspiracy theorists. It feels like fire, but it's really the water. إن قبل خروج الدجال 3 سنوات شدات يصيب الناس فيها جوع شديد يأمر الله السماء في السنة الأولى أن تحبس ثلث مطرها ويأمر الأرض أن تحبس ثلث نباتها. Before the appearance of the Dajjal, there will be 3 very difficult years which will afflict the people. The people will be afflicted with immense hunger. And where's the hunger coming from? Is it natural? Is it man-made? They have to create a famine. They have to create the conditions, right? Perhaps that's what they're doing, creating the condition for the famine to happen. Then you have to become dependent upon them completely. But the Prophet ﷺ said that the people will be afflicted for 3 years prior to this with intense hunger. يَأْمُرُ اللَّهُ السَّمَاءَ فِي السَّنَةِ الْأُولَى. Allah will order the sky during the first year to withhold 1/3 of his water. وَيَأْمُرُ الْأَرْضَ أَن تَحْبِسَ ثُلُثَ نَبَاتِهَا. And he will order the earth to withhold 1/3 of his vegetation. ثم يأمر السماء في السنة الثانية فتحبس ثلثي مطرها. And then he will order the sky during the second year to withhold 2/3 of his water. فتحبس مطرها كله ويأمر الأرض فتحبس ثلثي نباتها. He will order the earth to withhold 2/3 of its vegetation. ثم يأمر السماء في السنة الثالثة فتحبس مطرها كله. And then during the third year he will order the sky to withhold all of its water. فلا تقطر قطرة. And it will not send down a single drop of water during that year. وَيَأْمُرُ الْأَرْضَ فَتَحْبِسَ نَبَاتَهَا كُلَّهُ. And he will order the earth and it will withhold all of its vegetation. فَلَا تُنْبِتُ خَضْرَاءَ فَلَا تَبْقَى ذَاتُ ظُلْفٍ إِلَّا هَلَكَتْ إِلَّا مَا شَاءَ اللَّهُ. It said it will withhold all of its water, all of its vegetation, to the extent that there will be no greenery, and every animal, every livestock will die except for those Allah wills shall live. فَقِيلَ. And then the Sahaba asked the Messenger alayhi salatu wasalam, فَمَا يُعِيشُ النَّاسَ فِي ذَلِكَ الزَّمَانِ. Then what will nourish the people during that time? Listen to this response. Listen to this response. He said, التهليل والتكبير والتسبيح والتحميد لا إله إلا الله Allahu Akbar, Subhanallah, walhamdulillah. Yujra dhalika alayhim majra ta'am. And that itself will run within them down the same places where food typically runs. So in other words, that the fight, the true way to fight against the Dajjal is through our spirituality. Right, that you see the power of the word of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala during that time. You may be starving, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, La ilaha illallah is going to make you nourished. Subhanallah will nourish you. Alhamdulillah will nourish you. Allahu Akbar will nourish you during that time when that happens. At any rate, now of course there's always more that I can add, but I apologize for going on for so long, but it's an extremely important topic. Extremely important topic, and we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He grant us the guidance and the proper response to such challenging times. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala He grant relief to the people of Gaza. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala He come to their defense, and He also be for us and make us people who are sincere and committed to His word and to His messenger alayhi salatu wasalam. Wa sallallahu sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. Yeah.
In another 12 months and a few days we'll be going to the polls. What, in light of the comment that President Biden made today, I don't know if everybody's aware of it, but it's essentially disputing the figures of the casualty of Gaza.
Right.
Very disturbing.
Right.
What should be the position of the Muslim as far as the electoral process is concerned at this point? So serving our interest. So what should we do?
Yeah. Well, I would say that first and foremost, what we have to realize is that we're not going to find any saviors in the political realm. And I think that, unfortunately, for too many Muslims, politics has become a new pillar of our religion. I've only voted twice in my life, my entire life. And most of my life I didn't vote because it was a time when Muslims were saying it was haram to vote. But now we say it's almost like wajib to vote. And then, but it's not only wajib to vote, for most Muslims saying it's wajib to vote for a Democrat. That's it, right? I think it's not it's not wise to vote, one, as individuals, because, in particular with regard to national elections, right? But I think the local elections are even much more effective. You vote as a block. But in national elections, we should also be voting as blocks, but at the same time on the basis of our own values. And there has to be a certain amount of cynicism, in my view, about politics. As I stated earlier, this is a bipartisan issue between the Democrats and the Republicans when it comes to the matter of Israel. You know, that they all are pro-Israeli, right? Pro-Israeli when it comes to that. As a matter of fact, Biden is on record, you know, saying he's a Zionist, even before he was at the age he is right now. He says, you know, that I'm not even a Jewish, but I'm a Zionist, right? And he even said in one particular statement that if the state of Israel didn't exist, then we'd have to create one to exist. This is all before these recent times. And I think what happened was that Muslims were made so afraid of Trump because of the things that he was saying and he was planning to do with regard to the Muslim ban and things like that, that we were led into the arms of the Democrats. Again, they manipulated us with fear. They say, oh, this guy is so scary. You hear what he said about your religion? He said, Islam hates us. Or, yeah, that he was even saying things as crazy as, oh, we shouldn't only kill the terrorists, we should kill their families as well. Right? So this is early on before he won the nomination, but after he won the nomination, he changed, he dropped all of that talk. But at any rate, I think voting for a single issue is not wise either. And of course, we do definitely want to help our brothers and sisters in Philistine. We definitely want to do that, but there's very limited amount of things we can do. There are other concerns in the country as well, you know. So if we are going to participate in the political process, then we need to make a list of those concerns. And of course, we have to prioritize them as well. Which of them are the most important for us, right? Now, if that's the most important thing for you is Philistine and the conditions of Philistine, then okay, who are you going to vote for? Because both parties are, again, they're already biased in that direction. We have to look at all the other issues, what the pros and cons, the detriments, the benefits of voting for the other party, right? If not running our own candidates as well, right? So it's unfortunate that Biden would say those things, but for me, they're not surprising, because I heard him say worse things throughout his entire career. He's been in politics for about 50 years, right? And he's known for saying a lot of stupid things, right? And gaffes, and some things he means, and some things he doesn't mean, right? And I'm not convinced that he is our president right now. That I feel someone else is pulling his strings even at this point, because I don't feel that he's able to even operate as a normal person at this point. And so he's a perfect Manchurian candidate for whoever is pulling the strings right now, right? He's not really in charge, right? And most presidents are not really in charge either, right? Trump had somewhat of some control. I would say he was a bit, I feel that the reason that Trump is under so much scrutiny and there's so many attempts right now to actually imprison him has to do with the fact that he refuses to go along with the program completely. He goes along with the program sometimes, you know, partially, but not completely. He's not doing exactly what they want him to do. And I think that that's really what this is all about. And they're really scared to death of him getting back in office, because I do believe that if he does, he's going to go after the same people who have been going after him first and foremost. They're going to be the first thing. And they're afraid that they're going to end up in prison as well, right? You know, they're trying to put him in prison. First thing he's going to do is that. Right, so Muslims is not something, it's not, I don't think that's at the top of his list of concerns, what's happening with Muslims. He may say something about it, you know, but I don't think that's at the top of his list of concerns. You know, I mean, you have members of other parties too. I think Muslims should respect people's choices of who they vote for. I think we should also even respect people's choices not to vote at all, right? But as one man, he said that politics is downstream from culture, right? So if we want the politics to change, we have to change the culture. So if Muslims are actually committed to da'wah and committed to contributing to a virtuous society, right? I think that there is a good possibility that you will have that change one day, that shift one day, right? And it's, again, there's been a shift even now, but I don't think it's because of the efforts of Muslims. I think it's because of what happened with COVID, right? And half the country woke up, right? Oh my God, our government really is not working for us, right? Half the country, in particular, I'm talking about the Republicans, so they really woke up and said, we want our government to work for us, not for other people, right? But in time, with patience as well, and understanding that people who don't know Islam and don't really know Muslims are going to have negative viewpoints about Islam and Muslims, and it's to be expected, and we shouldn't get uptight about that, right? But rather, we should be those people there trying to clarify to them what real Islam is. But if we refuse to engage with those people, then we're at fault, right? We can't just say, okay, they don't like us, we're not going to deal with them, we're going to go deal with the other guy who speaks nice to us, right? Make us feel comfortable, feel good about ourselves, but then we compromise our children, their confusion about gender and all these other things. So, sorry for the long answer. Walaikum salam.
Working with the youth, I think the last couple of years, Muslim community has felt a kinship towards the conservatives.
Yeah.
We've had a lot of issues that we see eye to eye on, specifically when it comes to LGBT, transgenderism, and traditional family values.
Right.
And then, when these conflagrations happen, the conservatives are almost always staunchly,
Right.
neocon, Israel, etc. What should be the Muslim lens as far as allyship goes? And
As far as what goes? I'm sorry.
allyship.
Allyship. Okay. Yeah.
And how do we? Is there space to hold on to those shared values even when they're completely against us and these other things?
Right. Well, I would say that the vast majority of the base of the Republican Party, they're not neocons, at least not now. If you go back to perhaps maybe the early 2000s, maybe that was the case, right? When everyone was, when 9/11 was fresh in everyone's mind and people just wanted blood, right? Because all the Muslims did it, we have to do something about these Muslims. But today Trump actually has reshaped the mindset of the Republican base, not the politicians, not the Congress itself per se, but definitely a number of people in Congress, but the base themselves, they're anti-war. So it's as if like there's a shift. Back then it was the left that was anti-war, now it's the right which is anti-war. Right? It was the left who accused the right of being in bed with the bigwigs and the billionaires. Now it's the opposite, right? So things have actually shifted. So I think we can't decide not to be in some type of alliance with people on the right simply because of what we hear politicians say and what we hear their proxies and social media say, right? Because if you actually were to go to the pages of many of the social media influencers who actually have made statements in favor of Israel, that you look at the comment section, you'll see that most of the comments in most of these people's pages, they're like, listen, we don't have anything to do with that. We want to focus on America. We don't want, how can you be so crazy? I really like you. I thought you were a reasonable person. Why are you now, talking this stuff like this as if you don't think anymore, right? I thought you were a thinker, right? So you see a lot of that. So I think it's a mistake to just assume, oh my God, this guy who I shared a post from the other day now has some negative things to say about Palestinians and actually supports Israel going in and slaughtering the Palestinian people. And then you assume, okay, well, we can't work with them at all, right? I said, no, there are a lot of people on the ground who even if they don't fully understand what's happening there, but they really just don't really care that much about what's happening over there. They care about what's happening here. And those people, I believe you still can work with them, right? There's people who are just, we have very strong family values, committed to their churches, et cetera, and they themselves are not as politically savvy as a lot of these other people who actually making these very problematic statements. You're welcome. What? Like I said.
So, two very brief questions. The first one regarding the Dajjal. If you have any pointers, maybe from the Hadith, your research regarding the timeline. So, for example, you did mention that 3 years prior. But regarding like where we are now and when Prophet came and time like that, that's just the first. And second, and I may be just thinking out loud here, I loved how you ended up by saying that we are controlled by whoever provides really food, water, and all that. And we can see a shift, I believe, in how the world is being run or ruled these days. Like back in the day, power was to countries, now power of the world really belongs to corporations and firms like social media and all. And it's very unfortunate to see like 2 billion Muslims in the world, but all the social platforms, all that, they do not belong to us. Like Israel, like 15 million all over the world, and some of them are not even pro-Israel. But so moving forward, like as Muslims, us working together, don't you think that the numbers game will eventually win? I mean, even if they do say, hey, these people from Harvard or Stanford, they're not qualified, or they try to ruin their reputations because they're Muslims. I mean, just eventually the numbers game will work. There's one part I want to hear, and then I think it's also what's happening right there. Maybe it's just a wake-up call for us. You see, this is a wake-up call for us to reflect on what's happening. As you said, where do our tax money really goes to? It's not what we all think about, and we're all really living in something that's not really truth. You point to truth that's exactly it's really truth. So just maybe thoughts there on that second part, moving forward as Muslims and this December
game. In terms of the numbers game, now we know that Muslims are projected to outnumber, a number of other religious groups, in a few decades, right, in a lot of places. Now, I think that is one way to look at it. It's like, okay, well, the numbers game, you had to wait and be patient, and then, it'll just be too many of us for them to ignore. But that alone can't be a successful approach, because they can always find ways to reduce those numbers, as like they're doing right now in Gaza, right? You understand? And also because if we're just simply waiting, we're not being proactive in trying to protect ourselves and imagining ways to counter these efforts, then even if you have a lot of numbers, they're going to have control over those numbers, right? You understand? So the waiting game is not sufficient. Right? So we have to be very proactive about, like you mentioned, technology. We don't have how many Muslims actually themselves have, social media, successful social media apps or websites which offer these alternative perspectives. How many of us own satellites, right? Because that's the other part, is that you have your page, they turn it off, turn off the satellite to the satellite link. How many Muslim countries are putting satellites up into the sky to ensure that it can't just simply be cut off at will, right? So there are different ways to think about it, but definitely the numbers game is not going to be sufficient. Oh, the timeline. Well, yeah, the timeline, according to the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, he said that he's going to be in the world for 40 days, right? And I know you mean something a little bit different than this, but I would say one day, it said one day like a year, one day like a year, one day like a month. And there are different, narrations of the hadith. One day like Jummah and the rest like the rest of your days. So when exactly will happen, we don't know. We don't know when exactly it's going to happen, but fundamentally what we do know is that when he does emerge, that he's going to reign for some time, and the Imam al-Mahdi, according to our tradition, will appear, and Muslims will unite behind Imam Mahdi, and Isa ibn Maryam will descend during that time, and the Dajjal will be killed. Will be killed by Isa ibn Maryam when he comes, and then after that, the earth will be restored to justice. It will be perhaps one of the first times, at least since human beings have been on the planet, there's some type of heaven on earth for a time until Allah decides to destroy everyone on the earth by the emergence of Ya'juj wa Ma'juj. And then the last of the people who will be on the planet at the time, the Prophet ﷺ said that they were shirar an-nas. They would be the most evil, the most wicked of all people. In other words, when the trumpet is blown, there won't be any believers who remain here on the earth. But before that happens, he also said that the believers, that knowledge is going to be taken away from the world. And that knowledge, the most important knowledge, is the knowledge of Islam, right? And there will be people in the future who only will know La ilaha illallah. That's all they will know. And when they will be asked, well, why do you say this? He said, well, our forefathers used to say this, so we just say what they said. And then when the Sahaba asked the Prophet ﷺ, will that be enough for them? He said, yes, it will be enough for them. That's all, because that's all they will know, right, at that time. Yeah. So people will forget knowledge of salah, of siyam, of zakat, of hajj. Everything will be gone, right? It's even mentioned in the books that the Kaaba will be destroyed, right? So these are things, we just hope that we won't have a hand in any of them, the destruction of the earth, but we hope that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chooses us to be among those believers who won't be here, or those people who won't be here when the trumpet is blown and he makes the world anew, inshallah. Anything else? Alhamdulillah. بارك الله فيك وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. ربنا آتنا من لدنك رحمة وهيئ لنا من أمرنا رشدا. اللهم فرج عن المركوبين، اللهم فرج عليهم، اللهم يسر عليهم، اللهم يسر على أهل فلسطين يا رب العالمين، على أهل غزة، اللهم اغفر لهم وارحمهم، اللهم كن لهم وليا ونصيرا. ربنا آتنا من لدنك رحمة وهيئ لنا من أمرنا رشدا. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار. اللهم إنا نعوذ بك من فتنة المحياء وممات، وفتنة عذاب القبر، وفتنة مسيح الدجال، ومن عذاب النار وسوء المصير. اللهم اغفر لنا وارحمنا واهدنا واهدنا يا رب العالمين. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما كثيرا. وسبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. وسبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون والسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين.
sounds like it's going to take a break from it. You're in San Francisco, right?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Oh,